Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to go over how to represent fractions on a rectangle. So the first thing I want you to do is get to page 131 in your SAB. If you don't have your SAB out, just pause this video now and go grab it. Alright, so page 131. So for this page, the directions say represent each fraction on the rectangle shown below the fraction. So I'm going to do number 1 with you, and then you are going to finish the rest of the problems on your own. So let's zoom in on problem 1. We can see here that the fraction that they gave us is 3/8. Now, in order to represent 3/8 on this rectangle, we need to know how many squares are in this rectangle. All right, so we can see that there's 4 on one side, 4 squares high, and 6 squares wide. So that means there are 24 squares all together. Okay, so here really what we're looking at is equivalent fractions. So if 3/8 equals blank over 24, how can we figure out how many blocks to shade in? All right, so the fraction we're trying to represent is 3/8, but what we have here is a total of 24. So 24 is our denominator, but we need to figure out how many blocks we need to actually shade in order to represent that fraction. So, like I said, all we need to do is figure out an equivalent fraction to 3/8 that has 24 as the denominator. And that's pretty easy. So all you have to do is figure out, well, what's the connection between 8 and 24? What do we multiply by to get 24? Well, I know that 8 times 3 gives me 24, so all I have to do is multiply 3 on the top in order to get that equivalent fraction. So 3 times 3 is 9. So in order to represent 3/8 on this rectangle, I have to shade in 9 of the 24 squares. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and there's 4, 8, 9. So that actually that represents 3/8. Okay, so it's really just as simple as figuring out an equivalent fraction that helps you use the rectangle that you have and then shading in the number that you get as your missing number, which was 9 in our case. So I'm going to set up number 2 with you, but I'm not going to actually shade in number 2. You have to do that yourself. So let's look at this. Well, this isn't actually a rectangle, this would be a square. So we have 10 going up and 10 going across. So if it's 10 by 10, that means we have a square with 100 total. So if we want to represent 1/4 on this square and our total or our denominator is 100, we need to find the equivalent fraction. So how do I go from 4 to 100? Well, we have to think to ourselves, 4 times what gives me 100? Think about quarters. 4 quarters are in $1, and each quarter is 25 cents. So it's actually 4 times 25 gives you 100. So then you just have to do the same thing on the top. 1 times 25 gives you 25. So now we have a fraction we can actually use to shade in this square to represent 1/4. So we have to shade in 25 of these 100 squares to represent 1/4. Okay, so you can go ahead and shade in 25 of those squares. And then you also are going to be completing pages 132 and 133 using the same techniques. So just find an equivalent fraction using the total amount of squares, and then you'll know exactly how many squares to shade in, okay? And if you need to go over this again, just go ahead and restart the video and watch me do number 1 again, okay? And also number 2. So I did everything up to actually shading in those 25 squares. That's the only step left here, okay? So continue the rest on your own. Good luck.